we'll at least they can have the benefit of seeing your faces, which is a treat in real life. There it is. So,
all right.
When we
great.
speak, they want only the speaker, and our pictures are there until we're ready to go.
Yeah. Well, and however you want to do it when you're
Oh
presenting.
no,
this
I'm
is great.
fine.
No,
I'm happy. I'm just
We're
laughing.
here to support you.
Great. That's the spirit, Frank.
Ready to go live?
Yeah, you bet.
All right.
Let's do it.
Going live.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you. My name is Alan Mew. I am the current chair of the Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences, or WAQRR. You'll hear us refer to that acronym a few times during the morning, probably. And I am joined this morning by Frank and Sherry Candelario. Frank and Sherry are the owners and operators of Kate's House Foundation, located in King County, and they're going to be our presenters today on the topic of NIMBYism, which, as most of you know, or you probably wouldn't be here, it's not the phenomenon of not in my backyard. So I'm going to set that up here in just a minute, but I wanted to, before that, just give the briefest of introductions to what we do at WAQRR, in case you're unfamiliar with us. We are an organization of housing operators, primarily recovery housing operators. So we work with people coming out of addiction, and we work to support them in that journey. And we have three kind of primary functions. One of them is professional development, which is what we're doing today, of course. So helping operators in the broader community really do this work, and it's complex work, and there are just a lot of things to think about. So we want to be a provider of those kinds of services and connections for folks who are doing this. Second, we have an accreditation program. So we work to help providers get up to a standard, a quality standard that's set by the National Alliance for Recovery Residences, of which we are an affiliate. We're the state affiliate for NAR. And so we help folks get up to that standard, and then every year renew accreditation for them. So if you know that that a home is WAQRR accredited, you can have some sense that they have been thoroughly reviewed, and that we've spent some time with that operator to be sure that they meet the standard, and that gets reviewed again annually. And so that is really our primary work, is in the accreditation arena. And we really are proud of that, and we're growing that list of accredited providers, which you can find on our website, waqrr.org. Then the third thing that we do is advocacy. So we are regularly in touch with colleagues and other allies in Olympia and beyond, and even at the federal level, to continue to advocate for recovery housing, as we know how vital it is as a part of the continuum of care for people coming out of addiction and into recovery. And so for us, that advocacy piece can look like a lot of different things, but part of what we're doing today is preparing you, if you're an operator or even a friend of recovery residences, preparing you to answer some of those questions that are around that NIMBYism. But just a sneak peek at what we're doing in the next few months. We're sponsoring these webinars, and this webinar series has at least three more coming up. Next month, we're going to be doing a panel on working with residents with co-occurring disorders. So folks who have challenges both on the mental health side as well as the substance use disorder side, how do we best accompany them? And how do we do policy and practice in a way that is sensitive to where they're coming from, but also creates the best possible environment for them. The next month in May, we are really excited to have Steve Pullen with us. Steve is really the foremost attorney in the country around fair housing, especially as it relates to recovery residences. So if you have questions or you need a primer on what the Fair Housing Act has to say about recovery residences, really strongly encourage you to come to that in May. And then in June, we are doing a session on helping residents prepare for graduation or moving on or leaving a recovery residence what kind of things need to be in place for that to happen successfully. So that's what's coming up ahead, and you can go to our website, WAQRR.org, and click on the events tab at the top, and you'll see the calendar. And not only can you register for future events there, but you'll also be able to look at recordings of the webinars that we've done over the last several months. So without any further ado, I want to turn it over to the Candelarios, who are really going to help us kind of dive into this issue around fair. We're going to start talking about fair housing, I think, if our prior conversations are any indication, but really lead into the idea of how do you create the best possible scenario in the neighborhoods in which residences are popping up, and you want to plan a residence somewhere, but you've got some issues to work through. So I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues, Frank and Sherry, and take it away. And we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. We're going to hear somewhere around an hour, and then we're definitely going to leave time at the end for questions. You can feel free to use the chat box along the way. Our practice is Justin Cram, who's with us today as our technical guru. Justin will be monitoring the chat. Justin has blanket permission to interrupt the presentation with questions that you have in the chat, and if he feels like it would be timely to do that, he'll pop in and maybe throw one or two at Frank and Sherry. So anyway, as I said, I'm going to be quiet and turn it over. Thanks you all for being here.
Thank you. Okay, so we want. We'll be with you in just a second. We're having a screen share issue. Okay, there we go.
We good?
No. Okay, hold on one second, please. Thank you so much. We're Frank and Sherry Candelario, and we'll share the PowerPoint in a minute. We are the founders of Kate's House Foundation. And Kate's House was started with our own personal experience with a family member with addiction. And if, like many of you, we experienced firsthand a child struggling with alcohol and drugs. My daughter Kate was the perfect kid, adopted her from Russia when she was 6, amazing education, talented violinist, but sometimes the genetics get in the way. And Kate's parents were alcoholics. She became one. She fell into, harder drugs along the way. And I, by training, happened to be a pharmacologist and scientist from University of Washington Medical School. And, life has a tendency to play tricks on us. My area of publication was opioids, the drugs like Percocet, heroin, all of those types of drugs and how they affect the body. I did that before I met Kate. And I thought I knew a lot about how to help somebody in addiction. So along the way, we went to hospitals many, many times and recovery homes twice as many times. But what we found along the way is it was unregulated. And at that time in 2012 through 2015, accreditation didn't happen in Washington State. The accreditation standards that WAQRR presents started in a church basement with Alan and me and Frank and a few other people saying, we've got to set a standard for recovery housing. And the reason we did, and the reason we started Kate's House, is because my experiences with my daughter weren't always positive. And Frank and I said, we can do better. We can buy houses in great neighborhoods, neighborhoods that are middle-class neighborhoods where the neighbors will accept us. That's why we're talking about NIMBYism today, because we found that not always to be the case. So we're going to share with you what we've learned along the way. Frank, share about your background.
Okay, well, first of all, Sherry and I met in an elevator, started dating, realized she loved to serve other people. I saw pictures of her in Africa serving precious children. I used to get up on the streets of Seattle. We lived in a downtown condominium and I'd serve the homeless on the street. So I have a burning desire to serve. That was quite an attraction. 5.5 weeks later, we eloped. And a year and a half later after that, we started this foundation called Kate's House Foundation. That was 5 years ago, and we've grown. And we just love to serve, and we love working with Alan, because we're so proud of his leadership, because we recognize, I especially recognize, because I had never had an experience with this population. And that's not saying I'm better than anyone else. I just didn't experience that, but I sure learned a lot from Kate. And I learned that many times Sherry would put Kate in medically approved treatment and she'd do very well. But usually it was the recovery housing afterwards where, you know, she ran into troubles. And so anyway, we just proudly now opened up our 6th house, and we're teaching people all around the country to open up houses. And so we believe so much in WAQRR and what we're trying to do, increase the quality of housing, which will increase the rate of success amongst people trying to recover. So anyway, we just want to share with you, but I will tell you this, NIMBYism is really big on our map, because after 34 years, I was in branding company, and I worked on branding, keeping the brand, building the brand, and then protecting the brand. And we apply that to our Kate's houses, and we want to share those with you. And I'm sure you have wonderful ideas yourself. But the other thing about me is, prior to all that, I used to be a camp director.
Yeah.
I was a camp director, and running a recovery house, a bunch of recovery houses, is a lot like being a camp director, because you learn about keeping infrastructure going, keeping the water hot, the toilets flush, but you also deal with personalities that sometimes need to be moved around from house to house or bedroom to bedroom. So that's a little bit about me. I love the industry that Sherry and I now give most of our time to, and we're honored to be here with WAQRR.
One of the things we wanted to share is we're also into real estate in the fact we own all our own homes. We often buy them and rehab them ourselves. And we decided early on, our first home opened in late 2015, that we were going to plant these next to just in regular neighborhoods. We checked that zoning would allow us to put 8 people in a house, but we also started learning about fair housing, and we knew we had a right to be there. You have to have that confidence that you have a right to be there, because if you don't, your neighbors will be along the way calling the planning department. That's happened to us twice. You'll have the little car with the spinning yellow light show up in the driveway. That's happened to us too. So we want to really make this presentation about what we've done to get in regular neighborhoods in West Seattle, how we've done it, and also why people don't want recovery homes in their backyards. This concept of NIMBYism, and how WAQRR and the accreditation that is sweeping the country is changing the point of view of people where they're welcoming you. You know, we founded Kate's House Foundation. If you want more information, we are a nonprofit 501c3. You can go to our website, kateshousefoundation.org. We'll put it in the chat box. We tend to use this as an educational site. So if we find a great article about NIMBYism or fair housing, or just what Congress is doing, Congress is now funding the entire United States of America to look into putting recovery housing standards. In fact, right now, there are 28 NAR states. NAR means the National Alliance of Recovery Residences. And 28 states subscribe to NAR standards, and there's 6 more emerging right now. The rest are going to come, because once Congress deems that accreditation is necessary, the states follow along. In fact, in Washington State, Alan and the WAQRR board were instrumental in passing legislation to require that funding that flows through the state should go to homes that are accredited. And so WAQRR is available to help you do that. And among other things on that legislation were funds to help you open a home as a landlord. And we've done that too. So some of our homes, most of our homes we own, but we do have one leased home. So what happens when the neighbors do not want a sober home in their neighborhood? They make their voices known.
So we experienced part of that, and we're going to give you a lot of hints, but sometimes you feel like they want to run you out of town. Like,
so do you remember Frankenstein? Will you be run out of town?
We don't want those here.
One of our first experiences after we had beautifully rehabbed a home right near Westfield Village, walking distance to Safeway. The neighbors were in IT, they were firefighters, they were teachers. The neighbor across the street came to us and said, I'm watching your house. In fact, I've put a video camera on your house and I'm monitoring it 24 hours a day. And I don't think you should be here. Yeah, we were afraid we were going to be run out
Yeah, it
of
was our
town.
first house. We thought, well, this isn't starting very good.
And we didn't know anything about fair housing laws. WAQRR did not exist. Kate's House Foundation was founded on a different idea. And in a nutshell, where my daughter had failed repeatedly was in housing that had 15 minutes and you're out on the curb policy. So when we started Kate's House Foundation, we understand that is the norm for a lot of recovery housing. If that's how you're doing it, we understand it and we support it. But we wanted to do co-occurring disorders. And so that doesn't work when there's some mental health issues involved, or like my daughter, trauma from adoption. So we said, we won't have that policy. We'll remove housing insecurity. So for example, if somebody is having a problem in the house, we'll make sure we can work with, whether it's corrections officers, social workers, whoever needs to be brought into the picture to see if we can solve the problem internally. So if you wonder if you're going to be run out of town like Frankenstein, we pretty much felt we would. And you know, fast forward 5 years later, when we bought a house overlooking the water off of Ambaum, we had this experience again. So we'll get to that story.
We got a lot of great stories for you.
So-
Okay, what do people believe about sober homes? And this is the crux of it, that they believe that you may have neighbors who have experienced substandard recovery housing in their community. You know, we've all turned the corner, driven a few blocks and seen that house that's got the 4 or 5 broken down cars, you know, issues. You know what we're talking about. You may have neighbors who do not support your clients. And I'm going to tell you a little secret. I was one of these people. Before I got into this business, I will tell you, because I had no experience with this world, but people in recovery, people, addicts, people with problems with justice system, I really didn't put them very high on my list of people I really want to put energy to. Of course, now 5 years later, there's few people I admire more than people who are working really hard to get to recovery. And I'm proud that we and people with WAQRR standards are helping them reach those successful levels, get off that supervision, get back with their families.
You know, and this is the vision, you know, and I can recall putting Kate in homes that hospitals had recommended. And, you know, they said, we want to be paid with, Frank and I went to an ATM machine one night because they wanted cash that night at 9 o'clock when the hospital put her out. And they didn't have debris in the yard. But when we came back the next day to check on our 19-year-old, you know, it wasn't pretty. And they wouldn't allow us to come into the home. We couldn't tour the home. And they let us peek into the living room. The living room was neat and clean, but that was the extent of it. And, you know, we got really concerned about the places where she was going. And like many of you, we have experienced substandard housing or or substandard treatment of people. And, you know, the worst part about it is when someone is in recovery or their justice involved, they don't have a lot of esteem. They don't think they deserve a lot. So we wanted to make homes that people felt proud of, you know, and when we talk about that, we shop for furniture at Habitat for Humanity, but in Bellevue, where it's expensive furniture that's greatly reduced, and we decorate our homes because we want to have pride, but that is the assumption you're fighting. Your neighbors have seen this, they know of this, and they don't want you there. And so we want to have a paradigm. What's the paradigm shift? We want to have the paradigm shift with you. You know, we went into this and realized our neighbors have to accept our house. They have to support us. They need to support our people. You know, and I want to share with you who we house. Now, in 6 years, we estimate that we've housed 500 people. Right now, today, we're housing 52, 4 men's houses and 2 women's houses. we've been doing justice involved people from day one, but over the course of the pandemic, we've shifted because a lot of correctional facilities are taking 75-year-old men who have health issues out of prison and giving them to us because they don't want them to, contract COVID, or they have underlying conditions. So it's not safe. And what we found is of the last 3 70-plus-year-old men that we took in, they were Vietnam veterans. And that's another statistic I wanted to share with you. 8% of people who are justice involved are military. When you have PTSD, sometimes you do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do. So the paradigm shift for us started to be is, if we're going to be in this neighborhood, we have to make ourselves better. We have to meet the neighbors. We have to set our brand and our message.
When we have, there's 2 routes. We have a right to be in this neighborhood, and that's a good thing, that's for sure. But also we have a responsibility to the neighborhood. And that's where Sherry and I put a huge emphasis. And we're going to share with you as we go along the things that we've done, because I know it's hard to believe, but our neighbors actually love us. They love us, but it doesn't come easy. We put a lot of energy into good neighbor policy, which we totally support, and we want to share a lot of those tricks with you.
So how do we change minds? When I was looking for a photo last night to put in this spot, my Google search was poopy diapers. And as I'm looking at this baby, I'm seeing a little bit of that on his cheeks. And that's what people think. They think, oh my gosh, and the thing about babies in a poopy diaper, they don't want it changed. They don't want it changed because it's warm and it's mine.
Where'd you go off on that? But I'll tell you, the reason why we're talking about that is because we're also raising a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. We're raising our grandchildren. So I was wondering where you're going with that.
That's where I was going with that. How do we change minds? Let's talk about we have to eliminate the stereotype of recovery homes.
And in fairness, I'm going to tell you, in fairness, this is how I would have felt had I not been in this business. Oh, great, we're going to have one of those houses. I want to be really nice, because anyone who houses people, how can you be tough on them? But I don't want a house in my neighborhood that's going to decline the value. Okay, that makes me nervous. Those kind of houses usually get a lot of police visits. Okay. And the other thing is there's drug use and dealing and people coming and going all times of the night. Those are very disturbing things. And I don't blame anyone who has that perception from the get-go. It's our job to totally change that perception, and we have.
Well, I'm going to give another pitch for WAQRR, because when you have that accreditation or you're pending that accreditation, we have had 2 police visits in 6 years, and we instituted both. We had last one was 2 years ago. We had a gentleman who had taken a bad combination of drugs before he entered our home, and we didn't feel safe. So Frank called in the police not to have him removed, to get him to a hospital. And the police, Frank said, we're an accredited home. Here's our WAQRR certificate.
Pointed right to the certificate on the wall.
And the police looked at Frank and said, it's your decision, sir, of what you want us to do. Obviously he needs help. We can take him to jail, or we can take him to a hospital, because our premise is that people need medical help. We had this gentleman taken to a hospital, and it had a happy ending. He got treatment. He ended up with family. But when you have accreditation standards, that carries weight with law enforcement. One of the things, we have 6 houses, all in neighborhoods. The average value of our houses now is close to $700,000 each. They weren't when we purchased all of them, but we rehabbed them to that point. And so we're in decent neighborhoods. Our neighbors don't call the police on us because they love the people in our homes.
Okay, here's another chance for another story. We love telling stories. So Sherry and I, pre-pandemic, we're touring the country and doing pretty big conventions and talking about what we do, investing in real estate, getting a return, but serving a population. And so we had a room one day of 500 investors who they all wanted to learn how to buy houses. And Sherry and I stopped in the middle of it and we said, how many people in this room love and care about someone they know who's close to them, who's struggling with addiction? Sherry, 70% of the people raised their hands. And so we use this percentage everywhere we go. And one of the places we use it is we step out of our front door of a Kate's house and we say 70% on this block have someone they know and care about. And guess what? It turned out to be true. So there is empathy out there for people who love the idea that we're helping solve America's biggest problem. You know, we're having a high success rate. We're saving the state of Washington tens of millions of dollars, and we are helping, but so it's our neighbors who are literally as responsible as the success of healing as we are, except they don't have the consequence of that undesirable house that lacks rules, that has crazy people showing up all night.
You know, one of the things we talk about is house rules. Now, our house rules have grown over the years. We started with 14, we're up to 38. And every time something happens in the house, we go, oh, we learned something. I think we'll make a rule about that. You know.
Sherry, can I mention our newest rule? We have a new rule. It has nothing to do with NIMBYism, but it's within the house. I just love it because you're all kind of in this business, right? So we have some rooms that are 2 beds and kind of like a master bedroom and its own bathroom, right? Well, we have a guy who sleeps all night, but we have another guy who comes in like from restaurants like at 1 a.m. And he's new to the house. So what does he do? He gets up and he takes a shower and he's banging around making noise at 1 a.m. So we have a new rule. It's called Michael's rule. If you come home late at night and your roommate's sleeping, go down the hall. We have three showers in that house.
Yeah.
So,
and this is how we write rules.
We write rules based on necessity, and a lot of our NIMBY rules are based on the things that have happened that we can improve.
You know, the stereotype, we need to eliminate the stereotype. This is our backbone. Strangers coming and going. So we don't allow any visitors. Never have, never will. We tell people go to Starbucks.
Yeah, we encourage relationships to just go down the street because our neighbors, believe me, when they find out what we're doing, they're looking, they're checking, and they don't want strangers. And so we want to be loved in the neighborhood. So that's just one of our rules, and it works very well for us.
The other thing we do, because I was never allowed to go into the 12 or 15 recovery homes that I placed Kate in, even though they look nice on the outside, is we do let family members take a tour. You know, we want families to know their loved ones are in a great place. But the other issue they have when they find out you're a recovery home is their increased theft and crime. Well, it seems like unnatural if somebody is coming out of prison and we have a stereotype about people coming out of prison. What we have found is anybody coming out of prison are extremely well behaved. Like I said in the beginning, when we first started doing recovery homes, and we were doing 100% meth and heroin addicts releasing from prison who were on a program called DOSA. And DOSA meant they would go back to prison. It was a delayed sentencing alternative. I said, the babysitters for our people are men and women with bulletproof vests that say DOC with guns. How much safer can you get? You know, so, you know, we've always had a sense of humor about this. But what we found is when you work with people who are justice involved, they just want to move on, you know, and they want a great house and they want to go to work and they want to be respected. And so put people in a great neighborhood. And the benefit for us, and that's why we talk to real estate investors, benefit for us is we have homes that are appreciating in value. And, you know, and if the end point for this, we actually put all of these homes into a trust. If we pass away, they will live on as our legacy forever. And we're still buying homes. We're still bidding on homes. We try to buy 1 per year. Owners are detached. Let's talk about that.
I feel strongly about this because, and I got some examples of it, and I'll try to be brief. But what our neighbors appreciate is that when something awry goes or something suspicious, they call the owners. We are the owners. And anything that our neighbors are just concerned about, that's our brand we're risking. And we don't want to risk that brand. One day, Sherry and I were watching the Academy Awards, right? And I was waiting for, is La La Land going to win the Oscar for Movie of the Year? And they said, we'll be back after this commercial break to give the award to the best movie of the year. And I'm saying, great, I can't wait. Then I got a phone call during that commercial. Frank, and it was for this house you see on the screen. Okay, the next house you see on the screen. But They said, Frank, I'm sorry, but I just saw a man walk into your women's house. Well, okay. Hung up the phone. I went down there. It was very unpleasant, but we got it settled, and our neighbors, you know, they all talk. They were grateful. The owners are not just detached, and they have someone to call if there's a problem. I think that's a really big positive on our relationship with our neighbors. They know that, okay, every once in a while we're going to have an issue, but it's gonna get taken care of by us.
So this is one of our houses. When we talk about great homes and great neighborhoods, these are middle-class houses. You know, it's just Seattle real estate is very expensive. This was a foreclosure we rehabbed. And we talk about how do we change stereotypes. The grass is always mowed. Our gardens are immaculate. We put an American flag out in front. But there's another way we change stereotypes. When people come in, we have an orientation with our house rules. And one of our house rules is you need to meet the neighbors. And this house was a woman's house for many years, and our women liked to garage sale. So they would meet the neighbors, visit with everybody while they were garage sailing. And we found out the extent of the acceptance when, you know, their cars weren't that great. The neighbors were coming over to jumpstart the cars. Like some of you, 80% of our people do not have cars. So we're near bus lines. And our neighbors would see our ladies and put them in the car and drive them to the bus stop. What was interesting is we have an incredibly diverse household in every single home. And some of the ladies who lived in this house, they were from a different part of town, and they still carried that with them. And it didn't matter. Our neighbors were like, get in the car, we'll take you to work. And how did we change that stereotype? This house was actually the one where the planning department showed up and threatened to shut us down.
Yes, so I want to carry on. I always like to do a little editorial. One thing I love about what we've learned is these houses are in safe neighborhoods. They're in very safe neighborhoods. And our neighbors do love us. You know why? Because our residents do wave. A gentleman who has bone cancer across the street, we help him mow his lawn. We do and the word gets around. But I want to tell you something. We like diverse neighborhoods, but our houses are usually more diverse. And in this world where we hear a lot of negative stuff, I am so proud of America because we are not only appreciated because, again, we're helping solve America's problem, but we're loved. And so if you ever want to feel good about America, this is one good example.
We love the recovery home business because once we break into a new neighborhood, and it sounds like breaking into a house, but once we get in and we get established, you know, people support us. You know, so let's talk about brand. You know, we have the lawns are tended all the time. Paint, you know, we're painting our houses. Our parking, we don't ever have cars, you know, piling up in front of a house. And, you know, we're lucky because we have 6 houses. So if we see a certain house, we have too many resident cars, we can move some of those residents to another house, you know, and, you know, kind of spread the wealth of the automobile transportation. You know, we want to integrate into a neighborhood, but to do that, we get rid of the fear of the unknown. You know, one of the things I love about the business, first of all, we're helping people, but when we're putting people together in a great house, nicely furnished with everything they need, that's one thing they don't have to worry about. You know, everybody at night when they go to sleep, they want to feel secure. They want to feel that they don't have to worry about anything. And that's paramount with our housing. So, you know, because we're treating our people that way and we're treating our houses that way, our neighbors are, you know, within a month, we're just another on the street, you know. And another, you know, we talk about brand, you know, you have to have consistent behavior. And so those rules that we put together, those rules are consistent for every single person who's ever been in one of our houses. And so our rules actually point out good neighbor policy, and good neighbor policy of the NAR standards. And we've been doing good neighbor policy since before Washington was in our state, because we knew we have to get along with the neighborhood. You know, it's so incredibly important. And it does seem scary when we house in a new part of a community. We cross our fingers. And you know what we always find though, and this happens here, this was one of our really nice homes. We bought it in January of 2020, right before the pandemic. And they're about what happened with our empty house, which I think you're going to love. It was a really great neighborhood, and the next door neighbors didn't like the fact that we put 8 men in this house, and we were consistent zoning. By this time, we're accepted by our zip, but they didn't. Another one who happens to run a food bank came and shared with, you know, there's some ups and downs in the neighborhood. Some of the people don't want you here. Some of us want you here. I'm going to be your eyes. Frank didn't know these people. You know, as time turned on, the planning department, again, the same ones who showed up in 2016 at that gray house, called us and they said, oh, I got another anonymous complaint about one of your houses. And we said, which, and then I think they gave us the address. And oh no, what should we do? She said, I want you to know I was the person who investigated 6 years ago. I know your brand, know who you are. We'll take care of it. And what had happened, you know, because I want you to be secure, you can go wherever you want to open a home. We avoid places with homeowners associations, HOAs, and we always do look at how many people can we have in a house, because community builds. But we almost got run out of town this time. I practice law as a scientist, and I called one of my friends who's an attorney, and she said, you know, fair housing protects you. You have a right to be there. Let me take care of this. And she called the city attorney and talked to the city attorney, told her what we were doing. We're a nonprofit. We're a recovery home. And looking back in time, NAR wasn't in Washington State, but fair housing has been in Washington State as throughout the country since the 60s. And we are protected by state law. The city attorney agreed with us and wrote a letter to the Block Watch captain and said, this city supports Kate's House Foundation, Frank and Sherry Candelario, and what they're doing, and they can open up as many houses as they want. And carry that forward. And I guess what I want you all to understand from this, have confidence in when you are where you need to be, you're at the right time, and you're at the right place at the beginning. Because we were doing this when we were the only game in town, having the model that we had. And part of brand, Frank told you, friendly residents. We always tell our residents, even the guys who are 6'8" and look like a tree, tattoos everywhere, wave to everybody, introduce. And you know what we also have done? You know, the gentleman with cancer, we've got a house leader who's been with us for many years, organized the guys in the house to do all his lawn work, take his garbage cans out, you know, help in the neighborhood, you know, and that's a pretty common theme, because a lot of people in recovery, and you know, we know 70% of people are doing service is part of the recovery program. You know, giving back is part of the recovery program. So our friendly residents like to help in the neighborhood. And what we see is that comes back. You know, curb appeal, we're big on that. Our grass is always mowed. In the summertime, we'll buy lots of flowers and put them out. I think the thing that is the most critically important is house rules. And I know for some of you who are thinking of getting in the recovery home business, you go, how do we write house rules? Well, the lovely part of that is WAQRR has samples of that for you. And the National Alliance of Recovery Residences tells all of our state affiliates what should be in those house rules. And house rules have to be consistent. We have curfews. Nobody can come in past 10 o'clock at night. on a weekday, 11 o'clock on a weekend. Most of our people are in some sort of program. They're either drug court, so they haven't been incarcerated recently or at all, or they're on probation, or we've got a bunch of, we call them golden people. We have older people who can't afford to live independently.
In nice, safe,
nice-
a desirable neighborhood.
Right, they're on social SSI, Social Security, so they're duly diagnosed. And so we have a house of golden people. Everybody has the same house rules, consistent.
I want to say something though that feel very strongly about, because when we would go look for Kate in some places, you know, it didn't look like safe neighborhoods.
Right.
It looked a little sketchy, and I don't want to be mean, but it's just like, okay. So our brand is to make sure these people are very vulnerable, especially when they come to us. We want them to feel safe in their neighborhood, but I lecture them. I look them right in the eye. Some of them I have to look really high in the eye. I said, listen, do you like the house? Yes. Isn't it beautiful? Yes. I get a lot of yeses from them, but I tell them, I want to tell you something though. This is very important. It is critical that you understand that the only reason that we are in this neighborhood, the only reason we're in this neighborhood is because our neighbors allow us to be in the neighborhood. Because, and what I mean by that is they appreciate us being in the neighborhood. And now, if they say we don't want you in the neighborhood, even though we have a right to be there, I tell all our people, I'm selling this house. I don't want to be part of a negative impact on a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Not only that, we're investors, and I'm also a real estate agent, okay? And my name is attached to these houses anyway. So I tell them that it's critical that we have good relationship with our neighbors, and because if that relationship ever goes sour for any reason, you know, our option is just to sell the house and we'll go find somewhere else. So if you want this kind of wonderful Camelot, please always have it in the forefront of your mind that we have to reflect good neighbor policy.
So we teach our neighbors, or we teach our residents, sorry, and we teach our neighbors. That wasn't a Freudian slip. We teach our residents. This was actually a Christmas party we had back about 3 years ago. I'm sitting there in the middle holding our grandson who we're raising. He's now 4. And the lovely part about this is all of these women had been meth and heroin addicts at one point and been incarcerated for a long time, and we're on DOSA, and every single one of the moms have custody of their kids back. One of them is running a chain of restaurants, and all of them have said, you know, the change from where they came from to having safe, secure housing, to live in community, to being happy together, led to their ultimate success. I couldn't be prouder of the work that we do with people, because we believe in the power of change, in the power of human beings, in the power of housing, and housing is critical. You know, this note, our neighbors welcome us. We had a house, we actually still have the house. It was entirely populated from men who came from the Salvation Army recovery program. And the kids next door are in a daycare center. It's a home neighborhood daycare.
We're a house of that population, and right next to us is a daycare.
And these people sent this note. They brought over cookies, and they were the ones that told us they would let us know if anything ever went haywire. And as far as I know, the only time they've called was during the night of the Academy Awards presentation. And we've been in that home for 5 years. So, you know, this is not the first note we've gotten from a house. We took over one lease. So yes, you can lease a home and use it for recovery residents. And the lease that we took over was from a family who had owned the home for 45 years in that neighborhood. And it was a rental. And Lisa owns about 6 rentals. And we showed her the other homes that we owned when we told her what we wanted to do there. And she had never done anything like that, open a recovery home. It was going to be for men. But she agreed to it. We're now in our 2nd year of the lease, and now she's going to allow us to buy the home. which is great because we do like to own our real estate. So we got into that home for $4,000, $2,000 up front for the first month's rent, $2,000 a month security deposit. So if you're thinking about leasing a home, I'll tell you our little secret. We told Lisa, any repairs less than $1,000, we'll take care of that. We won't even bother you. We'll take care of the lawn. We'll make sure that we'll keep you apprised if anything goes wrong. But even then, it's larger than that. Most of our guys can fix things. And in fact, one of our guys, pretty major plumbing leak, and she said, you guys didn't have to do that. I have warranty insurance. And we said, it's part of what we do because you allow us to use your home. So that's good neighbor policy too.
Let me tell you the other component of that, because her grandfather owned that home. So the neighbors in that neighborhood, the people in that neighborhood, they knew the owner of the home and that this is leased. So what a bad reflection would it be if we didn't have a good neighbor policy, if our house was chaos, they would be thinking of actually the house owner. So numerous times she has said how thankful she is because she gets nothing but compliments from the neighbors.
What's kind of interesting is we've kind of revamped that house into one where a lot of our guys are on house arrest. It's called graduated reentry. And she'll pop in and talk to the guys. And, one of our long-term residents actually spent 35 years in prison. He's an amazing guy, and we've hired him on to provide peer support. But they have a great relationship. And so like us, our eyes were open wide to how amazing people can be, even when they've had hiccups in their life or big hiccups. So has our landlords and our neighbors. And this was a Valentine's Day. Lest you think we only get a one-shot welcome. We continue to get welcomes. It says, please feel free to knock on our door or call if you need anything. We always have coffee. From your neighbors, Nicole, Jeremy, Carly, Evelyn, Nolan, and Ben, obviously a lot of kids. That went to a house full of 6'8" men. And on the right here, this is a home we own. We're trying to show you examples of, homes that we own. So you don't think we're talking Beverly Hills, Bellevue. This one, I'm going to tell you the story. When we bought it, because we got it at a good price because it was infested with thousands and thousands of cockroaches, probably the only ones in the Seattle area. And again, this is a great photo of diversity. This was the people who lived in this house at that time. We just take all comers, you just fill out our application and come on down. And I'm particularly proud that woman standing next to Frank came to us from work release. And she has been working for us as an employee for about 6 years now. And she now oversees all 6 houses, the house leaders, and the major problems. And that was particularly important during COVID when you have a couple of grandparents, me with asthma, staying home during a pandemic. So, people always ask, isn't this a lot of work? No, this is probably one of the easiest businesses we have. The other piece of this is most of our funding comes from government contracts. And the people who work their way out of government contracts, we have an accountant who collects via MasterCard debit cards once a month. So we don't touch money, which is in our standard. And very seamlessly, money pops into our nonprofit account, allows us to make mortgage payments, pay utilities, pay for internet. If people need clothing, we're tapping into that fund to help any specific needs, and if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat box because we're going to flip into fair housing right now. And then we want to take as many questions as we can. Ask us anything. We've been speaking about shared housing, transitional housing, recovery housing, veterans housing. We've got students who are doing foster kids aging out of the system. We always tell people the major component of any population that you serve, everybody wants to be in a sober home. Nobody wants chaos in their home.
And to end up, I just need to say a major component of our success is the energy level that we put into good neighbor policy. Because without that, we have constant problems, constant issues. So we place a high value on that, and we hope you do too.
So let's talk about fair housing. This is how we have confidence we can be where we want to be. this is how we have confidence that we'll call an attorney if needed. Title VII of the Federal House of 1968 set up 7 categories of people that have protections, and now that's grown over the years. Disability being one, race, sex, color, national origin. I'm pausing for internet. Okay, national origin, religion, and family status. So that was the original component, and this has grown over the years. The Housing and Community Development Act added to this. In fact, the expert on this is going to be speaking for WAQRR in a couple of months. Hope you join.
I've seen him speak at the national convention. He's priceless. He's the best in the country.
So fair housing was amended, and it's the Americans with Disability Act that protects your golden people, your people with code disorders, and people with addiction. But it also protects too, and also state laws. The state of Washington has strong laws, drug and alcohol recovery housing. So during the pandemic, we had just bought a new house. We actually doubled our contract with one of our biggest providers because they didn't want people to jail. They wanted them in housing. We were not with eviction moratoriums because fair housing also protects landlords if people use drugs. So, we were collecting rents the entire past year where many landlords were not. 1968, this is the family status is how we're able to pour more people into a house, because prior to 1968, some landlords used to discriminate against large families. Pretty common back in the 60s for some families to have 11 or 13 kids. So fair housing was put into place to stop that. And housing and disability. Now we're talking about, addiction being a disability, and some people are afraid of that. They think, oh, people are going to say, disability of addiction means they will stay in my house. What? State law, the RCW comes in, as well as federal law, to protect you on that issue, and we're going to explain why. So reasonable accommodations are in a area, in a city, reasonable accommodation, you need a few more people. Reasonable accommodation applies to family. So family is any number of persons related to adoption. So we know that was 1968 fair housing, and up to 3, 4, or 5 related persons. We often hear people say, oh, I can only put 5 people in a house. That's not the case. You can, in some instances, pretty prevalent in Washington state, increase the number because zoning has already taken care of that. But you can also ask for accommodation, to ask for a waiver to increase the number of unrelated persons. The other issue with this is when they're talking about 5 people, that's on average. So if you're in a recovery house, sometimes that number goes down, sometimes that goes up. It's an average over a year. And, when we waive the maximum number, we can request that the members of a sober house be treated as a functional equivalent of a family. That's what Oxford Housing has done. And that's what our attorney also reminded the city attorney when we were having issues many years ago. And we also request that our property be treated as single family use. Well, we only buy single family homes. So, but if you have a duplex or a triplex, that is also can be a single family home. And so landlords have rights too. I'm going to go back to that because I don't have any text there. This is off the top of my head. The rights that you have as a landlord is if you have somebody who's dealing drugs in your house, they're not protected. If you have somebody who's repeatedly relapsing in your house, they're not protected. So, this is a topic we're going to address at greater length by WAQRR, but we always want to finish up with this because we want you to have confidence that you have the right to house people. You have the right to house people based on fair housing, and you have the right to have your recovery home do well for others, do well for yourself. Justin, if you have questions, we're ready to take them.
So we do have one that was just typed in from Alan Ridgers. And it says, I worked with the Oxford houses in the early 90s. They had what was called a slush fund to cover first, last, and deposit for a new house. We had two people that would buy big houses, do minimal upgrades, and rent them to Oxford at huge markups. What is, would be, or could be your contribution in acquiring a house or houses?
Okay, so when we purchase homes, the first few that we purchased, we actually own other real estate outside of Kate's house. So we're not eligible any longer for traditional loans. So you can get a traditional Fannie Mae loan for a second home or investment property for the first 10 homes that you want to purchase. I do know about that issue with Oxford because Kate went to probably 10 of those. And I don't agree with it. That's why we purchased our own homes and rehab them and continue to upgrade them. But we also know there is a revolving fund at the level of the state right now for accredited homes where you can get funding. You know, I think one of the things I love about talking about accredited housing is we experienced some of the worst. My teenager being put on a curve at 2 a.m. Because she hadn't done her chores. And this is my reality. We saw this. And with accreditation sweeping through the country, that's stopping. And so I kind of look back at before accreditation, which is what we experienced, and now. But at minimum, you can get into a house. We just had a student in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, get into a home for a recovery home for women with a 3% down payment. And we always tell people, you don't have to buy in Washington State in the Seattle area. We're not actually buying here anymore. We bid on a house a month ago and we stopped. We won't go over 600,000. But Spokane, go to Spokane because those same Department of Corrections vouchers that go from $500 to $700 a person per month are the same vouchers you get in Spokane.
But the houses are half.
The houses are half.
The price.
You know, we encourage people to buy your own houses, but we recognize not everybody can. We also encourage people, if you have a house that doesn't work as a recovery home, sell it and buy another one. And the third thing we tell people, and we have students who live in the recovery home with their clients.
Can I just pop in for a second and talk about the loan fund, just so everyone knows the applications have just become available. So it's not a great deal of funding. It's modeled after the Oxford fund that's available to landlords, but essentially it's a $4,000 loan. So again, if you're leasing, that works. If it could be, you know, somewhere it could help you toward a first and last. You could also use it for furnishings. You could use it for whatever. You just sort of list in the application what you're looking for. You have 2 years to pay it back, so it's a very reasonable, but it's no interest. So it's just a way that someone who's an operator or a would-be operator can get into, you know, without tons of upfront money, can sort of get going, especially if they're not offering a lot of services that are going to cost a lot of money. They could do that. So again, if you're going the kind of the leasing route, that's the way to go. The state is currently putting together a capital loan fund, which would be for bigger kinds of expenses, maybe on homes that you own that need some remodeling or those kinds of things. So they'd be for larger dollar amounts, and they're just working through the logistics. This is kind of a first time thing that the state is doing. So they're kind of building, they want to build the plane before they start flying it. So they're in process on that. And that we should hear, we're hoping by the end of the year that we'll be able to announce that that's up and running. But the small loan fund for, you know, just that $4,000 loans, those are available now, and you can go to the Healthcare Authority website and look those up.
I think that's so outstanding. I really do. And the reason being is we actually have a student in Colorado who we taught how to do what we do, no job, 28 years old, and they leased 4 homes. They're serving 32 people, and they're recovery homes, but they're taking men from the mission, not even people in programs, and they're doing great. And, you know, a loan fund like that would have helped them immensely. You know, one of the things we're trying to do is advocate for more operators. You know, even even if you can't afford to buy a house, we've had people get houses from church parishes. We've seen people take out SBA, Small Business Administration loans. Now they lend to real estate. But I think if you're first getting started, just familiarize yourself with WAQRR. You know, we're big advocates for WAQRR. Anything else, Justin?
Yes, we just got one that says, sorry, I came into this meeting late. I have a home that I am getting ready to rent. It is a single family ranch home in Bremerton, and I am hoping to live in it again when I retire. However, I am open to providing my home to families after watching a documentary called Poverty, Politics, and Profit. I would love some direction.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Would they like to be a recovery home operator? This is not a hard business, folks, because it's not really a business. It's a piece of your heart helping people. You know, I honestly believe in frankness too. When you're lifting somebody else up, it's pretty easy. You know, I mean, if you were to lease it, I would lease it to somebody, and I know we're not the only ones, somebody who's already has accredited homes in that area, because we're always looking for more housing. I know Alan has multiple homes, and it hurts to have to tell people, no, you can't come because we don't have room. And we're actually pretty tight for space at any given time because we have 2-year contracts, and which means that people will move in up to 2 years. And so we have to buy a new house to provide more space. You know, it's hard to get an opening in a Kate's house. But if you could lease to an accredited operator, maybe Alan can point you out somebody in that area. I know I just thought of something. We've had some amazing women live with us who were from Department of Corrections, who are off probation or back with their families, who are living out that way. So I think if you were willing to do DOC housing, there's such a huge need. And if you worked with an accredited operator to rent your home, just like we rented from Lisa says of her 5 properties were her best maintained. She loves coming to the house to meet the guys.
She loves being part of a solution.
Yeah, she feels like this is something I can do to help. I think Ellen can help.
Yeah, I think I'll just throw in too that it really depends on how involved you want to be. I think that's the question that you really want to answer pretty early on in that process, in that discernment process about what you want to do. So if you just want to help people, but you don't really have a lot of ability to get in there and meet the folks and be connected and all of that, you may want to rent to you would want to rent to a renter who doesn't have kind of high needs. Maybe they have more, if you're going the recovery housing route, maybe they have more recovery capital, or as Sherry suggested, you find an operator who's already doing this and you just rent to them and you let them do the management, as long as it's someone credible who's going to take care of your property. That would be the easiest. But if you want to get involved and be connected, then the sky's the limit in terms of how you want to do that. You certainly want to get some advice. So we actually do offer just consulting service at no cost to would-be providers who just want to kind of brainstorm, and we'll ask those kinds of questions. How involved do you want to be? What kind of care do you want to offer? Who's sort of your target audience? Who are you trying to serve? Those kinds of things. And it may or may not be in the recovery residence world. And if it looks like, my interests are broader than that, that's great. Housing is needed. Affordable housing is needed at all levels for all kinds of folks. So it may not be recovery housing that you're interested in, but we can help you sort of sort some of that out, if that's helpful.
I think that's great, Alan, because we've identified 12 different groups who are in need of housing. We just recently read a statistic that 70 million people are experiencing some sort of housing insecurity. That's huge. You know, that's a big percentage of the population. And so, you know, we've got a woman who took our recovery housing class, and she ended up housing all the doctors and nurses who were traveling across the country to serve COVID patients in a shared housing model. So the idea of shared housing is broader than just the recovery housing standards. I think our standards really set a guideline for any type of shared housing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the Vietnam, we're seeing that's a huge need. Oh my gosh. And the other thing that we are getting offered quite a bit, because we do have a national footprint on correctional housing and helping people make the next step. We are being contacted by attorneys doing compassionate release for older men and women throughout the country, because they really are saying, hey, you went to prison in 1985 because you handed somebody a bag of marijuana. Well, it's legal in most states and you have a life sentence. Let's get you out. And you're 70 now. And, how do these people
Where
can't
does that
live
person
alone.
go? Yeah.
Yeah, they can't live
Yeah.
alone. I can't tell you how many older people we pick in who cannot live alone now.
Mhm.
Well, any other questions? You can put your
Nope.
face on, Justin. I want to see you.
It's not looking like it. The person who we just answered their question gave their contact in the Q&A,
Okay.
saying, "This is my email. Please contact me."
Yeah, one of us will follow up. We'd be glad to do that. Justin, if you can hang on to that for us, that'd be
Yeah.
super helpful.
And then someone else asked if this is recorded, and it is recorded. It will be made available on our website in the next few days. I generally try and get it up by the following Monday. So it will be up on our website, and that's WAQRR.org, and it's under the recording tabs.
Yeah, WAQRR has grown enormously. It's just an organization we're so proud to be affiliated with. It's changing the tenor of shared housing in Washington State, just like it is across the country.
And rising the success rate of people who.
Oh yeah, that's
wanna
by the
get off
way,
Supervision and be in full
Our-
recovery.
our success rate is off the charts. It really is. And we all attribute it to
WAQRR and national
housing,
standards.
national standards in housing. It's the key contributor to success.
And those of you who have heard us these presentations before know that I can get on a soapbox about this, but the reality is, in terms of what it takes financially, even just from a strict economic perspective, what it takes to house somebody and to provide a healthy environment in which to do recovery is a fraction of what it costs to incarcerate somebody over and over again and to send them to treatment over and over again. And so we just believe from all levels, the more recovery housing, good recovery, quality recovery housing that we have, the better. And so the reason why we're tackling the NIMBYism question is because the community, and another way to say what I just said is that you can have the best treatment out there and the most redemptive judicial sanctioning process in the country. But when people leave those institutional settings, what the community does in the way of welcome has much more to do with their long-term success than any treatment or incarceration experience that they had. So how we as a community welcome people back from those experiences is going to say a lot more about their success than anything that they did while they were on the inside, wherever the inside was. And so if we want to just keep sending them back to the two most expensive systems that we have to work with people over and over again, we can do that. But then those folks are taking from the system as opposed to contributing to it, which is what we see. I know the Candelarios and I can tell you many stories of people who are now contributing to the system and are paying their taxes and are volunteering in the community and all of those things because they're in an environment that has enough support, enough structure, enough accountability, and to help them flourish. And it's a game changer.
Yeah.
There we go. I guess I did get on my soapbox, but there.
I'm glad you
Well
did.
done. Well said.
I'm so glad you did because we feel so strongly about it. And just so you know, when we started, I'm a patent counsel in a biotech company. Frank was running international marketing. We did not come from a background of knowing anything about recovery housing, except we said we want better for kids like Kate. That was it. It was just a mission. We were going to change the world for 19-year-olds. So you learn. We ran our first houses, hands-on. In fact, our first 3 houses were all young mothers who had spent time in prison for a felony while they were under the influence of meth or heroin or alcohol. You know, so you learn quickly, you learn to care, you learn how to do this. It's not a hard business. It's a wonderful business. You know, we wouldn't speak about it all the time if we didn't care.
We wake up to grateful people every day because all they want is a fair chance, a fair shot. They want to, and when you can make them feel middle class and that self-esteem rises, and after 4 or 5, 6 months, that's the point where we say that they almost never go back.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for your time. Grateful, Ellen and Justin, for the opportunity to talk about this, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you both. We truly appreciate it. And I'll just close with just a reminder to check our events page at the WAQRR website for future webinars, and to and that we will send out a follow-up email with an evaluation, and really appreciate you just taking a minute to fill those out. It helps us know how to keep offering the right content and inviting the right people to share. So Justin's got a word for us.
We did have one more question that came in. It says, it was mentioned that your daughter was a teen. How did the recovery houses work with your with youth? Are they in the same spaces as adults? So
she went to, I had her actually in East Texas for the year she was 18.
How much a month for that?
$8,000 a month. And it was a wonderful boarding school, and they had a lot of experience with Russian orphans. But my whole goal at that point was just to keep her alive. So it was 19 to 23 where we were doing non-accredited recovery housing, but they always looked nice and they charged a lot.
Your brochures were fantastic.
Yeah.
Big promises.
Yeah, but what happened at 23, she was down in San Diego and again, homeless. And she called for help, and I would lose sight of her for months at a time. I mean, she would come home, I'd take her to a hospital, we'd do a recovery house, she'd disappear. And we did that for 6 years. But she was in San Diego and she called and said, Mom, I need help. And she was obviously using. And so I found something on the internet because I couldn't leave her stranded in San Diego. And they said, sure, bring her over. Well, I think you all know that recovery houses won't take somebody who's been using drugs recently. And I told them, because I'm honest, that she's on something. And they said, that's fine, send her over. We'll let her sleep it off. And I thought, well, this is strange. Well, they were affiliated with a recovery hospital, and the home that I sent her to was a beautiful, stunning townhome right outside.
University of San Diego. The neighborhood is like, wow, this is a decent middle-class neighborhood.
But what was interesting is she had never lasted longer than a week in any recovery housing anywhere, you know, and sometimes they would ask me for more money and she was already gone. That's another videotape. But I waited 3 weeks to go down there because I would call and she was still there, which shocked me. And so finally at 3 weeks, I went down, and it was the first time I had seen her clean and sober since she was probably 12. She was down 23. And the recovery home operator had bought 3 townhomes, and she had nice neighborhood. She removed housing insecurity. Nobody got kicked out of the house for a relapse.
She had rules, but she had compassion too.
And so Kate's fine today. You know, that's the end story. She's a mother of a 4-year-old. She's working. She's finished up a technical degree, and she goes to AA and NA meetings. Everything's fine, but it was the housing. And we took that experience and said, if that could turn around a kid who chose homelessness for 6 years by having quality housing, we'll do one house in honor of Kate. So we bought a dilapidated daycare center and rehabbed it. I mean, falling down awful. And, you know, that started our real estate skills and started us into Department of Corrections women. Kate never was involved with the justice system, but, you know, that's.
Here you are.
Here we are. Here we are. Just had a vision. We had to do better.
Justin, any others before we wrap up? I want to be sure.
I do not. There's just another follow-up contact email.
Okay, well, thank you again, everyone, for your time. I always say that's the most precious thing we have to offer another human being. And we'll be in touch. Use our website for education. That's what it's for. Some great videos down there too. We do YouTubes. In fact, we're going to start doing a podcast too. Just little snippets, 5 minutes here and there on recovery housing. Oh, you got something, Frank?
No.
Frank's waving goodbye.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care, all, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.